Welcome to the Popcorn Talk Network, for the online broadcast network that features movie discussion, news, and interviews. Press 1. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies.
I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Well, welcome everybody. Hello, movie fans. Demetri, Panos here, part of the Popcorn Talk Network. Welcome to Anatomy of a Movie, where today we are going to drive through Mad Max Fury Road. Please allow me to introduce to you our fine host for today. We've got birthday girl Sara Stretton, and I only know that it's her birthday because it's mine too. And
We're
happy
birthday twins. Thank you. Happy birthday back to you.
Thank you.
Good to be here, talk about some good movies on like a birthday week. I was like, I had my fingers crossed because I didn't want to come in here bummed out about something.
I know, and then newbie to the Anatomy of a Movie crowd, but no stranger to AfterBuzz and the Popcorn Talk Network. Stephen Lemieux, say hello.
I even have intro music.
To yourself.
There we go.
Do you just
What are
carry
you
that
stepping
around
up
with
to the plate?
I just carry around the soundtrack.
Good. I like it.
Yeah, guys, you can follow me on Twitter at Stephen Lemieux. You may know me. Everyone comments on our Popcorn Talk videos when they see me, and they say, "Hey, it's Stephen from RuPaul's Drag Race AfterBuzz."
Sweet.
I don't even host that, but I'm just in the booth, and they know me from that.
Okay.
Well, I guess there are worse things to be known as.
I guess.
So, yes, today we're talking about Mad Max Fury Road. This is not necessarily a sequel, not necessarily a reboot. George Miller will call it a continuation, and we will break it down for you. So much to talk about, so I'm going to throw it to our hosts, and we're going to talk opinions. First and foremost, ladies first.
Well,
Birthday girl.
I was so excited to see this movie, and I was supposed to see it like opening day, and plans changed and I couldn't. And then all I was hearing for the next day was like people were in love with it. Heard that for the next couple of days. Like JTE was just like, it's the best movie I've seen all year. And so I was really pumped. I was like, maybe this movie's gonna start making my like top 10 action movies. And then I heard from Movie Mance, and he was like, story, like the story's a little missing. So I went into this movie with like really wondering where I was going to fall on the spectrum and expecting to fall on like a polar end. I thought I was going to either love it or hate it, and that didn't quite happen. There are a lot of things that I found fascinating, beautiful, exhilarating, and I really did enjoy it, but I can't give it the 99% that a lot of people are. Mm-hmm. I think it's a very strong like 80, 85, and there's things that as like an artist and a filmmaker I was like, it would pull me in at certain shots. But like overall, do I need to absolutely buy this movie? No, not for me personally. But I can't wait to talk about it because, as you said, there's so many individual elements that make this movie worth talking about.
I loved it, and I mean, if you're gonna get on a very like critical scale of like movies that are completely perfectly written and things like that, it's not gonna be a 10. It's not gonna be a 9. It's not gonna be an 8. But
sure,
if you're looking at it from a perspective of this is an action movie, it's purely what it was meant to be, and what they set out for as their goal to make is a Mad Max movie. 100%. This lives up to anything they could ever do with the franchise of Mad Max, and the fact is they rebooted a franchise that's 20, 30 years now old, and successfully created a movie that fans from old times who've watched the original, I loved Road Warrior, I loved Thunderdome, I loved the original Mad Max, I watched this movie, I'm like, I didn't feel like it was a different franchise. I didn't feel like it was recreating something I love and ruining it. Ghostbusters. I feel like this was another step as if they created in a movie 2 years after Beyond Thunderdome. I felt like it was phenomenal. I'm a huge fan of Mad Max. And when I left the theater, I was thinking, you know what? There's something missing. There was something missing from the movie with story-wise or whatever. But then I kind of second-guessed myself. I'm like, but throughout the movie, I was not thinking that. While I was watching that, I was completely in it. I was completely engaged. I didn't want to get up to go to the bathroom. I didn't want to look at my phone. I got text messages. I didn't even want to look at it. I was like,
stop.
in it.
What the hell's your phone on for anyways?
No,
A
like
surgeon,
vibrating.
a doctor?
Vibrating.
Well,
Yeah.
I didn't even take my phone out. Sacrilege in a movie theater. How dare you? But go on.
There's movies where you're just like, yeah, I'll pull my phone. This is not one of them. No one...
You can't say that to Demetri. He
No.
does not
Sacrilege.
approve.
Not one person in my theater stepped out of their seat from start to finish on this
Yeah.
movie. Not a single person got up to go to the bathroom. My girlfriend's sitting next to me, and she's like this the entire time. She's had to use the bathroom for the past 45 minutes of the movie, but she doesn't want to leave because she doesn't want to miss a second of the movie because it's so fast-paced.
She told me
Don't
because
know.
you
You could
handcuffed her
miss
to
the
the
5
seat.
minutes of dialogue.
You could.
5
You
minutes of
could miss
dialogue.
him saying that his name is Max.
Right. Well, no, listen. As far, for me, I'm a huge fan of Mad Max. And I want to talk about narrative in a bit and how narrative comes out in Mad Max movies, not just Fury Road. My opinion, I did love this movie. Number one, I think it was the most gorgeous, beautiful action movie since Skyfall. Skyfall was DP'd by Roger Deakins, a huge cinematographer within the world of within the world of Hollywood and making movies. This one, another, they lured back John Seale, who was in quote unquote retirement, and this is an Academy Award-winning director. Won an Academy Award for movies like The English Patient and such. And this movie was gorgeous. A good friend of mine, Peter Block, said he described this movie as if Cirque du Soleil were to interpret Dante's Inferno, it would look like Mad Max Fury Road. And he
they
nailed
did
it.
even draw
it was
from Cirque du
funny.
Soleil people,
Right.
so it makes sense.
So, I thought it was a beautiful movie that was intense. I think what is happening with what's going on, too, with this movie is its use and heavy use of practical effects. It's a very old school way of filmmaking that all of the Mad Max movies have fallen into. And even though there was CG used in this movie, about 80% of it was practical. And I think that it was accepted because even though they're driving into a storm, right? You know that this storm is like CG, but you know that the vehicles are real. So you let the melding of practical and CG, I think it's a breath of fresh air for a lot of moviegoers.
Completely.
Now, it's funny to me that what Mad Max, what the original brought to the screen was something that hadn't been seen before. Not in this way, what George Miller and Mel Gibson brought. And I felt, and then with Road Warrior, again, he brings this industrial kind of weirdness, and it's bizarre, and you get these bizarre characters with these weird names, and it's very, in a sense, industrial post-apocalyptic that was mimicked in movies like Weird Science and the social pop culture of what Mad Max has laid down. It's incredible. It's always looked this way. Well, we haven't had a movie like that in a long time. This isn't really any different than Road Warrior or even characters from Thunderdome, but because it's been 30 years, it really looks fresh and different, and it gives movie-going audiences something great to look at.
I'm really hoping that this kind of starts a trend because, I'm looking at the original Jurassic Park and how even as an adult you watch that movie and you're like, the fact that they're using practical effects for these dinosaurs, which dinosaurs are the most thing, they're not real. You know that they're not out there.
Sure.
But because it's not CG, a kid can watch the original Jurassic Park and be like, oh my God, they're real.
Yeah.
You watch the new ones, it's like, oh, it's like a video game. Oh, it's
Sure.
that. Oh, I can tell. This movie has a story that is so out there.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous, But the fact that it's practical effects and you can see it happening in real time, the physics don't screw with you. Because the physics are based in this world.
Right.
It's what we grew up with. It's what we know.
Am I the only one on this panel here that sort of kind of was thinking a little bit of Furious 7? Because of the car chases?
You have to, especially
okay.
right now in the speed. And for me, it was just interesting because a lot of people have been focusing so much, like the media attention on the practical effects of this movie has really drawn a lot of people in. It was in their, like when they were announcing this film, when they were showing it out, it was one of the things they wanted to highlight. And that's because so much of the effort and the artistry in this film did come from how they designed each and every stunt, death, car around the practical effects that were being made. It impacted not only the acting and who they were bringing cast into this film, but also the cars themselves. And there's a weight to that. There's a weight to the fact that they did use all of like new materials and innovation and all of the production designers quote bringing things that are beautiful and real and reimagining them, and they did that, and this combination to me creates a wonderful art piece.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. And for me too, I don't know. Again, I love going to the movies. You all know that. I saw this in XD, Cinemark XD, their new theater in Playa Vista. It was in this Dolby Atmos. It was in 3D, floor to ceiling screen. And I have to say, perhaps one of the best uses of 3D since like an Avatar movie. Really? I felt it was gorgeous. And not only that, thank God George Miller, he actually used 3D to have shit coming at you. And like, that sort of kind of effect, it become cliche when 3D was making its resurgence. And then, filmmakers sort of kind of shy away from that sort of thing. Right.
People definitely moved back. People didn't want that. It felt too forced.
And this time around, watching this movie, there were people in the audience that actually moved their heads. They moved their heads and went back. And I was like, see, when 3D is used, like James Cameron proved, 3D used smartly and well done, you were going to bring an audience in. And to me, the 3D and being on such a big screen and 61 speakers going off, and I was immersed.
I'm actually surprised you said that, because I've had such terrible experiences with 3D, and you wear glasses, I wear glasses too usually, so it's great that you say that. Watching this in 2D, I only saw one moment in the entire thing that I was obviously a 3D moment, was when the steering wheel is coming at you. That's the only obvious 3D moment.
Right.
Throughout the entire movie, I'm thinking if I was watching this in 3D, I can't even see where they would add it in.
Yeah, well, and it's funny too, because again, the way that this was filmed, they actually made brand new 3D cameras that they work with John Seal to use. But the other thing that worked great in 3D and the way that this was filmed is, George Miller, it was attention to focus. And he made sure that the focus of attention was always in center camera, like center camera and everything in the foreground and then in the background. And the depth with the 3D was just, it made every frame just look beautiful. And even though we're in this sandy, deserty kind of, it's something that's supposed to be drab, but they made it so vibrant and nice. And then the color schemes that changed on us, it was just amazing. Go ahead.
It adds to the beauty of it. I actually wanted to talk a second about, you did mention that he made a focus to bring in the characters center screen, to make people less confused, because you do have so much constantly going on. We're fixing the truck as we go. It's constant movement. And that was to allow the audience to better understand what was going on. Yet at the same time, it's interesting to me that one of the things to me that stuck out is the frame manipulation as he filmed this, whether it was slowing down or speeding things up. I wasn't bothered by it by watching. The person I was with got a headache in the beginning because of the speed manipulation, because it didn't feel, they could tell that it was being changed, so it was messing with their focus. But he says a quote, he was like, while on one hand you have a director who's saying, keep your main character in center so the audience can understand, but at the same time he says, I want to slow down bits so things are more clear, but I will also quicken up bits because I don't want them to be perfectly clear.
Right.
But what they do well in this, in that, yes, there is some. Honestly, when you're doing a movie that has so much going on, you're always going to risk having some aspects of that confusing the audience. So they did their best with the center screen. The speeding up and slowing down of time, though, a lot of movies do that. It's kind of like a cheap cinema trick. But this movie, I felt, did it so well by timing it with the soundtrack and the music. Because when you get that slowed down, it's always on a long note, and it slows your mind down to the point where you're like while it's slowing down, because then you're like trying to go fast. And so I think they did some things to lessen the blow in response to that. But I understand, like, but at the same time, it's not Blair Witch. It's not
Well, I never got the sense that it was handheld. Like, I never got that kind of shaky thing. And again, we'll go back, like, using this sort of kind of a technique throughout Mad Max. I mean, the original Mad Max, sped up the film to make the cars go, a little bit faster. And, they used some trickery back then in 1980 or 79 when they were filming the original. And George Miller really is people may not, they're giving him credit now, but this is also the guy that did Babe the Gallant Pig, Happy Feet. He's done kids movies, and he's a really smart storyteller. And I think from Mad Max, as simplistic as it is, it never. You never tire of watching it because there's just something that's fascinating going on. And, whatever trickery he uses, whether it's lighting, speeding up, slowing down, your focus of attention as an audience member, you don't lose focus and you don't want to take your eyes off the screen. And in today's world where things are chopped up so quickly, like sometimes in an action movie, it's hard. You have a hard time. Like, what the hell? There's a fight scene going on, and you don't know what the hell's going on. In this, as quickly as it was edited and cut, you pretty much had an idea of your geography, who was fighting who, when, and just like the choreography of putting it all together.
He's very talented at perspective, and what I mean by that is when you're at a wide shot. If you're just looking at a car that's 10 miles away driving, it's going to look slow to you. So you have to speed that shot up to stay with the pace of the scene that you're filming. And that's why when you have the audio and the dialogue, it's usually on a close-up, because from close-up, even if you're going 10, 15 miles an hour, it looks pretty damn fast.
Yeah.
So you'll notice when you're watching this movie that a lot of the dialogue is on a close-up, and that's why there's not a lot of dialogue, because it allowed them the freedom of doing all these stunts with the pikes that they're swinging down on without the risk of going actually at like 80, 90 miles per hour. Because when you see the behind the scenes, there's like a 40-minute behind the scenes video for this movie that has a lot of this stunt work and this action, and it looks like they're going pretty slow because they can't do these stunts at high speeds. They really can't. It'd be so dangerous.
I think they're normally going at about 80 kilometers, which is like
55, 60.
50.
Yeah, so they're going at a speed that, it's fast, but to go the speed that they're supposed to look like in the movie would be impossible. And to add dialogue into scenes where, it would be...
And the other thing that I found fascinating, too, is that they used 3,500 storyboards.
It's phenomenal.
So, kudos to that artist, to map out everything. So I'm sure there was some semblance of a previs, but just to storyboard things out 3,500 storyboard drawings is a lot.
Did you know that when they finished filming, it was like 3,505 scenes? It was so spot on that they literally. I mean, that's what I loved about this movie too. 15 years in the making. You have the time to really plan things out.
Yeah, and it
wasn't planned to be 15 years in the making.
But
no.
You're smarter about scripts. I really am not a fan of the movies that are like, oh, let's write a script. First draft, let's put it on the screen, and then you have a movie that's Transformers 4 or something like that.
Right.
I don't like that. I like it when they take their time, and it worries me that they were getting like 2 or 3 sequels to this. I really just hope they take their time on the script.
Well, that sometimes it's hard because you put that out there that that's not always a choice. That's a studio audience demand. It's that now when you look at what's coming out, there's a schedule, and it's booked 6 years in advance over what's going to be made and how it has to follow up, and you have to deal with fan interaction and actors' contracts, and it's like, oh, this movie, how's the opening numbers? Great, green light. Let's get this done and start filming in 4 months. And so I don't think that's necessarily always the artist being like, I just want to get this made. It's the whole pressure of like wanting to keep that train going.
Yeah, I understand that. I just think they need more time.
Aspect of it, and you know, again, as what Sara said, it wasn't planned. The hiatus wasn't planned. I mean, the one thing that I will say that I did miss in this, and people may hate me for this, I actually missed Mel Gibson. I really did. I mean,
I want to talk about that.
This is one of those. Look, I love Tom Hardy. I think if we were going to find somebody, I think he was perfect. But there is something about Mad Mel that, you know, well, number one, he put his stamp on this role. It would be much like, for me, if they swapped out Indiana Jones. Like, Harrison Ford to me is Indiana Jones, and if you bring somebody else in to play Indiana Jones, I'd be, I'm going to miss this. And Mel Gibson, in the 3 movies he starred in, he really did make it his own. I was missing those piercing blue eyes and his accent and whatnot.
Pardon me, like, I don't disagree with you. I think that it was a smart choice, being that it's been 30 years, and just looking at part of the self-factor that we've talked about of this movie is the realism, is the fact that they are doing their own stunts, is that we are watching serious athletes and acrobats and quickness. And I think if Mel, although he's like healthy and whatnot, if you brought him into this and made him reprise his Mad Max role, I think that some of the believability would have been suspended, at least for me, because I do know he's older. I do know that you're going to be getting tons of stunt doubles for his work. Sure. And is he really survived that long in the context of this? How old do they make him?
That's a great point. Like, you're right, and I think at this point, like, had they brought Mel on before, like, when they originally wanted to do this, I think it would have been a different movie. But to your point, by bringing Mel in, here's what's going to happen. Unless you severely digitally Photoshop him throughout the entire movie, because he looks older, the audience is going to feel as if there was a great passage of time since the last time we saw Mad Max. And George Miller did not want that. He wanted this to take place like 10 minutes after, like, Thunderdome, or it could have been.
He's been super subtle with that, though.
Yes,
because he's in all of his interviews and everything he says. It's very subtle in where this is and when this is actually taking place.
Right.
He never says the sequel. He always says it's a continuation. It's set in the same world. We don't know if it's a new Max. And there's several fan theories. One of my favorites is that. Are you going to talk about this?
No, go ahead. I love this stuff.
The wild child from Road Warrior is Tom Hardy. That's what a lot of people... And that's why he's not very good at speaking, and that's why he doesn't really have a name. She asks the name, and he doesn't have a name. So when he's like Max, it's like just that's what he's taking on. Yeah. There's a huge theory you can read up on it. It's great. There's some holes in it. Alexis is the one that turned me on to the theory. Right, Alexis?
Yes, thumbs up.
And yeah, there's lots of holes in it, but of course, any fan theory, there's going to be lots of holes in it. But it's super interesting, and for this, I think if they put 2015, they put Mel Gibson in this role, the movie would not do as well with Tom Hardy, and it's because of the bad publicity Mel's gotten, and like we can't avoid that. Nobody's really putting Mel in movies right now, but. What I will say is, based on this movie, you're not sure of the timeline, which gives them a lot of openness to write the next ones.
Right.
We have the space to put Mel in one of the sequels.
Yeah.
And they will. Go ahead.
But no. But and that's exactly my point. I think by putting Mel in there, it's because he is older, it suggests a major passage of time, especially if said person is watching. Either the original Mad Max or up to Thunderdome, you're going to say, oh, the guy got older, so this is taking place even 25
Yeah.
years into the future. And Miller didn't want that, so you were going to add to
I
that.
was just going to add in there to either spawn more fan theories or whatnot. One of the rumors was that Mel was going to have a cameo in this.
Yes.
And they took it out. And that to me says something. If we're going to learn more about that in the 2, 3, and 4 installments we're about to get of this, who knows? But there was talk of bringing him in, and that would have sent a very different message.
I think
if
so,
they
and
had
it-
made him a different character, it would have been, oh, then this is Max. If they had made him Max, then this
Right.
would have been his,
Yeah, I think
wild
it would
child.
have taken me out of the movie had Mel been in it, and I'm not saying anything against Mel.
It just adds a
Gibson.
lot of questions.
It just would have sort of kind of taken me out of the movie. As it was in the back of my head, I really throughout the movie I couldn't help but think of him, and nothing against Tom Hardy. Again, I just those movies, I really love the movies a lot, and that's what I grew up watching Mel Gibson do it. Hey. This is the movie, Mad Max was the movie that really brought him into the spotlight. And when you watch making ofs on that movie and what they went through as far as practical effects and stunts and things, and it was pretty amazing. But when you look at Fury Road today, they really didn't do all that much different, but the technology
Is better.
they had is better.
And the budget is a lot higher.
Yeah.
To speculate, I'd say the cameo for Mel Gibson, I would say it would probably be one of the, like how the girl was a ghost with the skull over it. I would say that one of the cameos would be a ghost of his past. Would you see
Perhaps.
Mel Gibson?
Who knows? And I'm sure that within the next 4 we'll see him once.
Oh, yeah,
especially because he
definitely.
approved of this one. But
I want to talk about acting, but you brought it up right at the top, we have to talk a little bit about narrative. Simplistic, one of our fearless leader co-host Phil Zvitek found it way too simplistic for his tastes.
to the point that he walked out of the movie. I'll put it out there.
He walked
Tweet
out.
at PD Svitek and tell him how much he should have watched the last 15 minutes.
Listen, I find it interesting because he was he's the counterbalance to everybody who loves this movie, and his was the counterbalance. Now, granted, he had not seen a Mad Max movie before. The narrative to the Mad Max movies, with the exception of the first movie, the original Mad Max has a narrative, and about 3/4 of the way through, the movie becomes a revenge kind of a movie. Okay.
Revenge, redemption.
Yeah, it's a revenge. It's a redemption. Max's life is altered forever, but he is the focus of the movie. It's called Mad Max. Once you get into Road Warrior and Thunderdome, and now Fury Road, Max isn't our lead character. We are, as an audience, we're rambling along with Max.
He's another vehicle.
Yeah, he's just he's the person from which we're seeing these events take place. But the word anti-hero really fits the character because he's the guy that doesn't want anything to do with anything. Even in Road Warrior, he really doesn't want to help these people out all that much. And going into Thunderdome, he ends up getting sort of kind of roped in. And it's the other characters who are in this one, it's Furiosa.
Yes.
She's the lead character of this movie, even though this is called Mad Max.
Even George Miller says that in his quotes. When he talks about camera angles and where to center, he says she, not he. It's obvious that she's his main focus. To me, Tom Hardy is just a vehicle of how he increases action. He creates a new opportunity. He's the one who causes the switch around. He is another device. It's interesting to me because it's not even solely from his perspective.
No.
We aren't getting that it's his. We're not getting that he's the figurative narrator showing the story of Furiosa, someone he interacted with. Because we do get shots that he is not privy to.
Yeah.
We do get close-ups on Furiosa. We get when Mad Max is still being a body bag and he doesn't know any of this is going on. We as an audience are still shown all of that.
Yeah.
And we're shown this world through multiple people's eyes. So to me, this is very much not Mad Max's movie because it's not as much about his arc. If you're talking about all the stories that someone's gone through in his life, this would be the time that Mad Max
Right.
had an adventure with Furiosa versus like this is the defining or one of the defining stories of Furiosa's life.
Yeah, no, it's like unlike say Indiana Jones, where we're following the intrepid archaeologist through these action adventure supernaturalistic worlds, and you know what he's combating with Mad Max is again starting with Road Warrior. You know, he's the guy that's ambling along, and you know he sees all this stuff, and he's like, you know, I'm just, you know what, my head's not with it. I don't want to help you. It's like I'm in this world. It's dog eat dog, and you know, just get out of my way. And even in this movie, he's just like, look, get out. I don't care what your cause is. I just want your truck. I want to get out of here.
It's interesting because on Action Movie Anatomy, two of the hosts didn't actually understand that. They rate their top 10, top 20 heroes and things like that, and they're like, Max wouldn't even be in that because he's not even like a hero in this. And I'm like, but that's kind of the point. Like, he is a drifter. I mean, you're gonna hate me for making this comparison, but he is like Quantum Leap. Like, he comes in, he alters the story of everyone else's lives, and then he leaves. I mean, he is the Quantum Leap of this world.
Yeah, I look at him as Cain. He just wanders the earth, and he's got this, you know, he has this baggage with him, but he doesn't really want to get involved anymore. He just somehow gets brought in, and it's through the other characters that his character seems to flourish. He's almost like the Deus Ex Machina of the, you know, he's the hand of God that comes in that changes the parameters and just changes everything for our lead characters. And he ends up, you know, look, the guy was a cop. He used to do good deeds. He protected people. And after he saw he couldn't protect his own family, and there's another thing about Max. You have to notice the fact that this is a guy that gets the shit beat out of him in every movie. Like, he takes his licks. You know, I mean,
The
whether it be
first
he
half
gets
hour of
shot.
this movie.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he is not, I mean, in this movie, and they're sort of kind of dark and twisted. I was actually sort of kind of surprised that this movie had more of that upbeat ending. It seemed to be a little bit more upbeat than especially Road Warrior. And you know, this is a guy that takes his licks. You know, he has his arm run over. He gets shot in the leg. You know, he gets beat up. He loses his interceptor. That awesome car within the first 10 minutes.
And then he gets it back, and then he destroys it.
He's used as a blood bag,
right,
for these people. It's hilarious. I mean, he is like never in the good position that he wants, and I do want
to. No, it's what a week I'm having.
I think it's interesting because a lot of people talked about Furiosa as she is the main focus of this film, and we'll get into the whole feminist and whatever talk later because that's an interesting talk that I don't really understand too well why you guys are getting upset. But the interesting thing is people are going to be angry in the next few films because she's not going to be in it. And a lot of people argue that, but if you look at Road Warrior, if you look at Thunderdome, and if you look at Mad Max, the original, there are well-written characters that are not Max, that are more interesting than Max, but they're not in the next films because it's about where he ends up, and you need to introduce new characters every.
Yeah, well,
his effect on other people.
Throughout Road Warrior and Thunderdome, there was one character, Australian character actor, who he was the guy, he had the helicopter guy,
and you see him in this movie.
Yeah, and you know he's one thread in those movies as well. But you're right. I mean, it's just going on. These are the adventures that Max just happens to fall in on. Like, we're meeting these people. They've got their lives. They've got whatever is going on. And then this guy comes in and he's like, what am I doing here? It's almost like what am I doing here? I don't want to get involved. I'm going to go my own way. But he gets dragged in. And then, you know, he can never overcome his good nature. I mean, you know, as mad as he is, he knows, like, his willingness to help those who need help. He ends up being there, and that's what makes him sort of kind of the anti-hero. He doesn't want to, but the better part of him always prevails.
What's going to make this franchise phenomenal, and it's something George Miller is great at, is the fact that he's willing to ditch great characters to bring in new characters. And I think that's the fall of so many good television series nowadays. Like, if you look at The Walking Dead, they have so many characters from, like, the first and second season still that you're keeping them on. It leaves no room to bring in a new, interesting character, or even you have to kill them off to get rid of them so you can't bring them back later. I think we will get Furiosa again. I don't think she will be in the next movie, though.
Yeah, I don't know.
She's now a safe haven. It's an opportunity.
Yeah, and I just think that, again, Miller had done it before with the previous Mad Max movies, but it's not something that the Hollywood movie is used to doing. It's rare that a character, who the movie is named after isn't necessarily the main character. And again, that gave a fresh perspective because we haven't seen this in 30 years. And I think, maybe subconsciously, or maybe people noticed it while they're watching this movie, it was something new and different to look at. And this is why this movie has been getting so much attention and such. Deservedly so. So there we go for the narrative. Did you want to? What were you gonna?
I was going to touch on something that you started bringing up, which is the feminism act. And I've been hearing this word so much this week.
I know.
And I'm going to pull two things together. First of all, this is from something Charlize said in an interview, which I find very interesting. The question was, is this a feminist film? And Charlize says, you know what I think is even more powerful about it? I think George didn't have a feminist agenda up his sleeve. It's just very truthful, and I really applaud him for that. When we use the word feminism, people get a little freaked out. It's like we somehow are being put on a pedestal. George has this innate understanding of what women are, just as complex and interesting as a man. Through his need and want for the truth, he actually made an incredibly feminist movie. So she's saying that this wasn't a mission to be like, let's introduce feminist principles to a male-dominated genre. It was just him exploring story. And he did it in an accurate way by implying, like, he brought in, the consultation of a woman writer who did the vagina monologues. And yes, that made things, in my opinion, very truthful. At the same time this week, there was a huge backlash over, if any of you are Game of Thrones fans, people saying that the Sansa Stark rape scene was, like, just really anti-feminist. And George Martin came out and said, this is a film about war and power.
Right.
I think it's actually more inaccurate and untruthful. This is actually not a direct quote. This is me paraphrasing. That rape happens in times of war throughout history. So him including it is his idea to be truthful. And I think if you look at these two stories, people are up in awe about these agendas. But I really think in this case, these two filmmakers are just trying to tell truthful stories. And I think that they are doing it in their own way. And what you take from film is the beauty of film, and how that affects your life is your own interest.
Well, I agree. Everything you're saying I agree, but I have to add to this, and this is I think, in a major part why there's been so much conversation about feminism and why this. It is a big sticking point in Hollywood today. Women's roles in movies, whether they are on the studio side, whether they're in movies, whether there are writers who are writing women as strong characters and female characters. There are many out there, and I don't disagree, that believe that a lot of women are not getting the same breaks as male actors do. I think I'm going to talk about Fury Road. I look at a Charlize Theron. Number one, I think is she's an amazing actress. I mean, Academy Award nominated. I forget if she won for Monster, but she's a fantastic actress. Okay,
she did win for Monster because I know she has an Oscar. I know that it's also not her favorite award, and her favorite award is her Victoria's Secret Great Legs Award or something,
which is fantastic.
But in case you're wondering,
I'm not gonna. Well, she does, and and way to go, Charlize. But in Fury Road, she is, she's a great action heroine. Again, someone who takes her licks. And another thing about narrative that I want to get into, especially about Furiosa, we're introduced to this character And there's very little background about her that we know. I mean, she's missing an arm. We don't know how any of that happened. We don't know about any of like how she became to be what she is. And yet we're still willing to go along for the ride. So keeping a little bit of the mystery, it's really not important. We just know that this is a character that has gone through her licks, and we sympathize. We follow her because she has an honorable agenda and journey to take. She played it great. I thought she was amazing. And she further on goes to prove that, yes, women can play in action hero movies. You know, I think not enough credit is given to somebody like a James Cameron, who for the most part in his movie, well, not for the most part, in every movie there is a strong female presence who is not waiting for the rescue of a man and things like that. And I don't know what talk about Fury Road is. She pretty much, you know, they rely on Max because Max says, hey, you know, why don't we do this? It's not like he comes to, like, he has to rescue her. Max does it out of, because
it's a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, and you know, she plays a very strong, gutsy character to do what she does. And even when Max tries to hijack him, she's like, listen, I got this to do. And she was great. She was great. So all this talk about feminism, it really comes to light. Now, another big news story that came out regarding feminism this week, because I'm so glad we're talking about this, is that Maggie Gyllenhaal, while in Cannes, was being interviewed about sexism in Hollywood, and this happened in which she was auditioning for a role where she was to be the love interest for an actor or character who's 55 years old. Now, Maggie Gyllenhaal is 34, 35, and she was told that she was too old to play a person who's going to have a love story with a 55-year-old man at 34. Shame on you, Hollywood. Like, that sends out such the wrong message to women, to little girls, to you, Sara, who's you're a budding actress. To get that to say, oh my God, at 34, you're too old to be in a relationship with a 55-year-old man? That's terrible. So wherever Hollywood takes 2 steps forward, they're always taking 5 steps back and doing something stupid in which this kind of news gets out. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that there can be some good female writing, and you don't have to be just Meryl Streep to get all these roles.
This is what I'm going to say is the good news about it, though, because yes, that is a hard story to hear, and that one came out this week, and there was also one coming out this week about A-list actresses who've auditioned for movies and they can't land down the role until the male leads have been established. Like, they're still shopping for male leads, and they'll be like, we really like you, but we can't finalize you until we pick the males. The good news is, if there's any silver lining, is at least now they aren't hiding those stories.
No.
Now it's not, or it hasn't been, like, she's going to say that to a reporter and people are talking about it, versus this has been happening for years, and I think a lot of people have those stories and don't come out and say them because they don't want to seem hard to work with or be put like on like blacklisted or whatnot. There are bad stories, and I'm sure there are bad stories that have happened to guy actors as well, but at least people are feeling now the bravery to talk about it and not fear as much for their careers or for what it's going to do to them.
Who would have thunk, movie fans, that we'd be talking about feminism during a dissection of Mad Max Fury Road? But I think it's important because I think all of the women in this movie, in one way, shape, or form, portrayed a vision of hope, a vision of strength. I mean, even the old, even the old woman there, like, they were fighting for survival. They weren't damsels in distress. They really, they moved the plot along in a strong sense.
Honestly, I just don't get it. Like, I honestly don't get what people are angry at. Yeah, I'm a firm believer in that everyone's equal. I don't really care for the extreme feminists. I don't care for the extreme masculists or whatever you want to call them. I think if anything, any ideal taken to an extreme is ridiculous. I feel like a lot of people jumped on this movie saying that it's super feminist, blah, 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 as kind of a sarcastic hit towards what feminists are driving for right now. And it's just guys being spiteful in some respects.
It could be,
and I was watching this movie I watched the entire thing, and all I'm thinking is, these are great characters.
Right.
I'm not thinking that's a great female character. I'm not thinking she's a great female superhero or hero. I'm not thinking he's a great male hero. I'm like, they're fucking badasses, pardon my language.
No, but I looked at her the same way or in a similar fashion that I would look at a Sarah Connor or a Ripley.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't look at them as women. I look at them as great characters. And the mere fact that she is a woman, kudos. And we just want to see more and more of this. But we had another great thing happen this week. And again, we're not talking about. I got to go jump into another movie quickly, which you guys are going to break down later. Pitch Perfect 2. This Elizabeth Banks. Okay. Unfortunately, I can't be part of it. I just couldn't squeeze it into my schedule to see it. Not that I didn't want to. I enjoyed the first one. But I want to talk Elizabeth Banks because, again, here is a woman who has it all. She's smart. She's business savvy. She's a good actress. She's funny. She can be a comedian. And then last on that list, I have to say, she's very attractive. And when you throw comedy into that, at least for my taste, a woman who is funny can become more attractive to me. And I think that she directed this Pitch Perfect 2. It's her first time she produced it. She has her own production company. And this movie's so over-indexed in the charts. I mean, I know she's getting a lot of press, but I have to give her credit, even without having to see the movie, doing what she did in entertaining audiences. So, yes, Hollywood should be giving actresses and directors, and you look at Catherine Bigelow's, they should be getting like some more roles and such. And in a movie like Mad Max Fury Road, I didn't look at it as feminism at all.
And I'm gonna bring this back to Mad Max.
Yeah.
I do get to talk about Pitch Perfect later.
Thank you.
To top this off, we talked about how maybe Mad Max doesn't have too much of an arc. I think if you look at the Mad Max series, including the older films, he does have more because he is more giving in his help at the end of this movie, and he isn't as reluctant. But we talked about Furiosa having arc. The other arc belongs to Nux.
Yeah.
Nux
Oh,
is
yeah,
transformed,
absolutely.
and he by far has the largest transformation. If you look at the fact that his arc is from a worshipping fanatic
Right.
to someone who sympathizes and uses his own belief in a weird transformative way to, instead of seeking being witnessed from his God, he's witnessed by someone he actually has formed a connection with, or someone on a personal level instead of this isn't just we had very strong, wonderful fighting characters, but our other arc does belong to him.
Absolutely.
And he is a secondary character who literally, if you actually looking on a scale, has the biggest turnaround of all of them.
And
Absolutely.
it's not even that he has the biggest turnaround, but it's not even that he has the biggest story. It's just that his story is the one most verbal. He has the most verbal story because in this movie, there's a lot of subtle things that tell a story. Like,
Absolutely.
if I'm going to reference something like Star Wars, the original Star Wars, it tells a story through imagery. You immediately know who's the bad guy because a big black hooded guy walks into a pure white room.
Sure.
It's the most famous example of using imagery to tell a story without using words.
Right.
This one, tattooing Max, blood O type. I know some people who missed that, who didn't, who were like, oh, how does he have the same blood type as her in the end? I'm like, because in the beginning it says that.
And they say it 500 times that he's a
Right.
universal donor. Sorry,
But
just saying.
There's a lot in this story that if you're not watching, you're missing.
Right.
And if you're not paying attention and trying to find out these deals, if you're not looking for the story, it's going to miss you by and you're just going to have a movie that's an action movie. But to your point, Nux is a great character because I honestly thought he was going to get shot in the head as soon as Max got that gun and Nux gave him the gun. Every time this character could have died, and I was like, oh, they're going to kill him now. They don't kill him. And then finally when I'm like, okay, maybe he'll survive. Damn it, they kill him. Like, that is the epitome of a great character.
But it was a self-sacrifice as well.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what makes that character give the arc, because at the beginning of the movie, this character was not going to sacrifice himself for not for those people, if anything.
For Joe, but
yeah. So, you know, I found that, again, when we talk about narrative, I found that, and again, how did he go through this transformation? It was with the help of women. And it wasn't that they needed him, it was he needed them to have his eyes opened about, wow, look what's going. Yeah, geez, maybe they were treated horribly, and wow, look at this strong woman, and wow, maybe I can have a
finally
relationship.
personal connection.
It was.
We got the difference of just like looking at the playing fields that he comes from, where everyone is so up high and out of reach and godlike, and you don't know them on a personal level. You know them in a spotlight, versus he actually finally gets to touch someone else. You have that one scene where they're in the more or less, I think it's like a Volkswagen Bug on top of top in the back,
the war machine.
But you have them laying just directly next to each other, just simply looking at each other, and it's finally a personal connection versus devoting your whole life to someone that it's an idol. Well, it's a living idol.
It's amazing to me because that's what I love about shows like Anatomy of a Movie and things like that, is when you love a movie, things don't really come to mind when you're watching it or right afterwards. So you need to talk about it to actually like get that out, and things pop into your head. And one of the things that pops into my head is, when you watch the beginning of this movie, you see the poor people who you can immediately connect with. You're like, they're the humans, and then the monsters. You see the people in white, and they show some humanity when they talk to each other. But in the end, you're like, yeah, kill them all, kill them all. This is a character that one of the small things in this movie is they're looking for hope. And when you're looking at a world that is completely desolate and absence of hope, you have a character who is a monster who is brought to being somebody that you care about, being somebody that is the hope that all of these other people, all of these other monsters actually have humanity inside of them. And you don't see that from the beginning, but at the end you're like, this is a story of a civilization of monsters that is just because you're the outside looking in. They all have their own personal story and personal reason for where they are where they are.
Absolutely.
And once you care about them, then you kill them.
Yes.
Sure, absolutely. A quick break in the action because we are live, correct?
Yes,
we're
we are live.
without Annette. I don't know who Annette is, but have there been any comments? Because you bring up a great point. Like, sometimes it's through discussion. This is why I love, and to me, I consider it a privilege to be part of this. When you talk about movies and, like, you know, each of us brings in our own facets, our own personalities and knowledge and whatnot, you know, but I always love, like, through this conversation, more comes out. Like, you can end up learning more about something because maybe somebody else saw something that you may have missed. And that's why, too, folks, I really do read the comments about these breakdowns that people have to say, because there have been some intelligent, great comments, you know, where I go, oh my head, you know, and I'll write back to somebody going, you know, that was well played, because you're right, that's a great way to look at things. Has anybody brought anything up? Is anybody monitoring?
A lot of people in the chat are just talking about where is this story going to go next. They're really wondering how they're going to continue this, and if we're going to get kind of, one person really wants the beginning, like Jonathan Falciani wants to know, how did we get plunged into this new medieval landscape? I think just from nuclear warfare, I don't think George Miller's going to go back. I think he'd rather move forward with this story and just maybe have subtle hints at how this happened.
And again, I will go back to the original Mad Max. We're plunged into this world. There really isn't any great explanation as to what's going on. We know as much as they do.
They're asking, who ruined the world? Who destroyed the world?
Yeah, and I just, you know, to me, no explanation needed, much like there's no explanation needed for me as to why Furiosa's arm is not there. We just know that something really bad happened.
There is a comic that they made, and they're doing three novels for the comic, and people are worried that they're actually going to give too much of Furiosa's background, and it's going to ruin the mysterious that she has in this movie.
Yeah, and I think that's what keeps you as an audience. It's like, as soon as you realize that she doesn't have an arm, you're like, what? Wait, what? Wow, okay. And like, there's not even like a throwaway line that says, when I was young, or this happened, or whatever. And as far as this nuclear, whatever brought land to waste, it happened. Who cares? This is the world we live in now. This is the world that I've created. Here's Max. He's a cop, and he's dealing with Knight Rider, Toe Cutter, family, keeping them together, and we're off to the races.
I want to take a second, to cut away, because we were doing it a second ago. Guys, you know what really helps us out here at Popcorn Talk is if you go to iTunes and you download Anatomy of a Movie, give a comment, and we will give you a shout out if you give a comment and 5 stars, because that's what we need. We want to know what you guys think. And, we have this live chat. Yeah. But a lot of you guys aren't around noon on a Friday. It's working, you're having a weekend, whatever. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment, hit that thumbs up. It super helps us out. And then go on iTunes and leave us a comment, because we want to talk with you, even if you can't watch it live.
Absolutely. And it's very important. And I think that's one of the fun things about, we're talking about movies. We're not looking necessarily to change the world. And when we're talking about a Mad Max Fury Road, we here are in agreement to different levels, but that's what makes talking about this so great. And so we talked about narrative. And I really think we dissected narrative. Were you going to bring something else up?
What I was going to bring up is, we have people in the chat who's been like, what could they also explore? And then you brought up there's no throwaway line that we got about Furiosa's arm. But I think what's interesting is, I don't know if we're going to go forward or back, or if we're just going to sidestep to a different area. Because what they do throw into this is little elements of other areas that are in the video games or whatnot, where we do get the line about Gastown, where we do get the line about the people coming from the bullet farm. These are all places that we haven't explored. And we don't know how they're being run or what's been going on there. Right. So I think there are other options that they give kind of flashes to. We have the crows, we have the green place, we have the whole story of where Furiosa comes from, what has happened to them. I don't think we necessarily need to go find out what's happened to the world, but we have a lot of areas in Australia, or what used to be Australia, that we can explore.
And think about what you said, though, too. It's like Gastown. That says it all. Gastown. Okay, I'm going to assume that it's a place that holds a lot of gasoline. It's not a sandbag place. I mean, but who knows? And George Miller's not. And again, I think it's clever in dialogue in naming these places, because it instantly goes, oh yeah, if we got to go to Gastown, means that this is where we're going to go to refuel.
Just shortens the dialogue. You need one sentence instead of a paragraph of exposition.
It creates a world as well.
They create a world, but at the same time, they don't show us the entire thing. If this movie had opened up on a shot of the globe and then went inwards and you saw everything, we're in such a small part of this world that we don't know what's going on everywhere else in it. We don't know if there is civilization still somewhere else. This could just be Australia's blown up and the whole world's exactly the same as before. We don't know.
Right. No, and you know what? I'll be honest. Perfectly fine with me, because when I go to a Mad Max movie, this is what I'm sort of familiar with the world that Miller has created. He expands upon said world in a sense by, the green place and all these great, these great nuances that he just layers and layers and layers in this world where I don't have to know everything about it, but I understand what's going on. And I think that helps with me. That helps the narrative in which Max's journey is, he ambles along. So I wanted to move over for a little bit. We have to talk about acting in this movie. We talked about narrative and what drives narrative, and what makes, in my opinion, part of what makes narrative believable is the acting. We touched upon Tom Hardy a little bit, taking over the role of Max. Charlize Theron, I told what did you folks feel about her performance in this movie?
I mean, I thought she was great. I thought she had fantastic moments of strength, and I didn't feel like was being pounded into us to either feel bad for her or to accept that. We do get that one, we don't even hear it. We just see the guttural scream that she has, but then we don't see her moping. No. After we don't see her dwelling in that emotion. We don't even hear it. We know it's there. She's committed to that moment. And then we go back and this is just part of her life. Yep. She has had a hard life this whole time, and I really like that we didn't make it she doesn't know what to do next. Now she's going to be stumped for 5 minutes. Right. We just move on. Next plan. Yep. Let's do something else. This is the world of survival. Yeah. But yeah, I thought that they all did wonderful jobs. There wasn't really there was a couple moments that I was a little confused about with like the wives, but that was more of like, why is she now wearing lipstick and running back towards gonna run across the desert to her husband?
You didn't understand that?
I mean,
scene?
I understood it. I understand like why she was doing it, and I also understood that it was a callback in the end, why it made sense that they might be a little fearful of her jumping on his car, because is she betraying them or is she going to help?
Yeah.
I thought it was a little obvious and a little forced to me. But
Well, she wasn't
nothing
betraying them. There was, I was never really worried about her betraying them. I think it was
But
just...
I think that's why that first scene with her, about her running, I think that's why that's put in there. To put for some people the doubt that she might betray them because she's already had this faltering step earlier in the movie.
Okay, I'm just making sure you know why she had the faltering step.
Oh, yeah. Because, like, there's a lack of hope, and that, although it's not healthy, there's some sort of stability.
Still seems harder than the road before.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
No,
you know,
I get it.
I thought Nicholas
it's a little
Hoult
obvious.
was really good, and in some cases unrecognizable.
Oh, I didn't.
You know,
Took me half the movie to recognize who he was.
Yeah.
I like to go into movies not really researching them, especially movies like this, because, I mean, the more you know about Tom Hardy, the more that you're going to be looking for nuances about Tom Hardy. The more you know about Nicholas Hoult, the more you're going to be like, oh, he looks like the guy from this. I don't like doing that. That's why I don't like researching before I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, another strength of the Mad Max series, with maybe the exception of Thunderdome, which showcased Tina Turner, who at that time was huge, in you know, wanting to become an actress, but she was very recognizable. You know, the Mad Max movies, outside, you know, the first one had a cast that nobody knew who the hell really anybody was. You know, again, Mel Gibson this is his break. You know, and in this movie, so we have Tom Hardy, we have Charlize Theron, right? We have Nicholas Hoult, who's practically unrecognizable, and then a cast of people, with maybe the exception of a Zoe Kravitz, that either be underneath the mat. We don't know who these people are, and I think that's another reason there's nothing to detract from this story, because nobody is so grand to me that it took away.
I'm gonna be the devil's advocate here, where, like, to me sometimes, and it probably would have been more helpful if I had done a little bit more in this, I do like to look through the names, because I'll be like, where do I know you from? And there's a lot of people in this who are either in X-Men or Rose Huntington Wheatley, who I recognize, obviously. So sometimes I do like to just familiarize myself, so I don't spend the extra 10 seconds being like, what is your IMDb?
But there was nobody in this movie that I went, whoa, wait a minute.
There was no, like, 12 Years a Slave moment.
Yeah,
where you see Brad Pitt and you're like, what the
there's
hell?
nobody like that.
Yeah.
And to me, the most genius bit of casting in this movie was casting Hugh Keays-Byrne, who was Immortan Joe, and he was the main villain in the original Mad Max. He was Toe Cutter. And so I love the little homage to Mad Max, in which there's a quick scene in which there were some of his thugs, and they all hiss like Toe Cutter does in the original Mad Max, and it's just great that he was the main villain.
You also
in this
get the shot of his eyes in one of the flashbacks. That happens as well. They did a lot of references to the original series.
And the characters' names are great. I mean, you know, you got Immortan Joe, Imperator Furiosa, Rictus Erectus, Toast the Knowing. I mean, you know, Miller doesn't just throw a one-named, you know, one word, you know, these people aren't like Cher. You know, he gives them, like, you know, the splendid Angerard. You know, he builds a character. He gives them full names, albeit weird names, but they fit in this world.
The only other thing I can really compare it to is the world building and the character imagery from Dune.
Sure.
When you look at Frank Herbert's Dune, you look at the characters, I can pinpoint imagery from that, and I can find it in characters on Mad Max.
Sure.
But it's not similar enough that it throws me off. But the kid, like in the dude in the chair with the telescope, that was like directly out of the floating guy from Dune and things like that. Like, there's nuances from these filmmakers that just really create worlds phenomenally.
Yeah.
You brought up the telescope child, which I think also segues into this is a little bit more plot. But the fact that they gave Immortan Joe that one line of humanity, that he was like so connected to his family, and there's lines like, this is all over a family, like all over a family matter, or when we see him take out his own car to try and avoid saving the splendid. I liked that. I liked that he did have this weird, needs his family, his sons, like whether they're deformed or crazy. There's like that strange unit that he established for himself. I thought was a really interesting character development.
It gave a motivation to the villain, and which we can almost identify with if he wasn't so just crazy. And the methods of obtaining this family and keeping it together are crazy, but at least it gives him motivation as to why he's chasing after these
this is what's great about talking about it. If you look at the character and you look at the circumstances, he looks like he's 50 or 60, which means he could have lived through the fall. And I don't know if that's for sure, but his burns, like it shows them putting dust on his burns, they look like radiation. And then he's having children that are all mutated. You see the good shot of that one guy with his eye that looks like a frog. His son is not. His son is weird. His other son, he cares about these women so much because they're perfect. Yeah. They're healthy, perfect beings. They're his harem of healthy, perfect beings. Right. And that's why it was so interesting, and what he cared about was the baby healthy. Yeah. He's a warlord. He's basically the CEO. He has everything, but he has one son that's a cripple, like in the chair. He has another son that's just that obese guy looking really
like an ox.
He has another son who's completely unintelligent but really strong. Right. All he wants is a healthy heir. Yep. And they take that from him. Like that's. It's just these subtleties that you pick him out, and you can see that this is what he was doing.
And again, it's simplicity that's layered. Yeah. Like you can look at Mad Max Fury Road, and I think you can break down all the other Mad Max movies as well. You can break it down by layers. I want to talk to you about Tom Hardy because something happened within the past week as well. We sort of kind of gave an insight to Tom Hardy. Now, just like my own personal aside, I actually was like about as close to Tom Hardy as I am to you, Stephen. A couple of weeks ago, I was at CinemaCon. I was having a dinner at a restaurant over there and just waiting for the table, and Tom Hardy came up. Now, this guy is an intense-looking guy. He's squat. He's not overly tall, but he's got a presence. He's got mass, and he had this Grizzly Adams beard that went to hell, like kind of thing, and he walked up to the thing, and I'm the kind of person that if I admire like an actor or an actress, and if the situation arises where it's you're not appropriate, I will say hey I'm a fan or whatever. It never came, like with him, I was intimidated by this guy. And just recently regarding Mad Max, while they were in Cannes, he came out and talked, he said he owes George Miller an apology. Because as he was filming it, he went on to say that, well, he was sort of kind of difficult. He's like, George was asking him to do this, and he couldn't picture in his head how this was going to look. He goes, because I got frustrated during the movie's shoot. Now, I look at that as being, I went nuts, and I was being belligerent, or I was not being easy to work with. And then after he saw the movie, he was like, oh, you know what, man? I owe you an apology. I was wrong. He's supposedly signed on, he said, to do at least 3 more of these should the occasion arise. But the mere fact that he publicly came on board and said, I was probably a real jerk on set. I didn't mean it. He goes, I'm sorry, but George, I owe you an apology. I thought it was a great little insight to how Tom Hardy could work and how he might be on set. But I think filling in the shoes for Mel Gibson, I think he did a good job.
It's 7.5 months in the desert. Yeah. I mean, it's really hard. It'd probably be pretty hard to not kind of be an ass sometimes and be really frustrated.
Sure.
Also, I feel like George Miller seems to be so specific with what he creates. And you're talking about someone who is in his mind, has worked with this many storyboards, and then you're bringing an actor and probably being very, very specific, but he's a mad genius who has this whole thing in his head. That's hard to grasp. Also, he does things a little differently. Like, I want to get into the production design of this and what he did, but we know that each individual design item was meant to be beautiful, it was meant to be functional, it was meant to be safe, and for all the effort they put in, they don't zoom in on all of it.
Right,
like, for instance, we have a shot behind us of Mad Max and his muzzle, and this piece, as Demetri pointed out, is just a simple garden tool. And you can see it in this because it's a still. And that we know takes effort. But you don't see him as a filmmaker being like, I now need to show you every little thing that I transformed and focus in and get you to understand what I made. He made it and it looks beautiful and it's a general overall image that you get, but we don't get the zoom in to show you that he took a shovel and made it a muzzle. You don't get the zoom in to show you that it's a VW on top of the tanker. It's an overall vibe instead of like a, let me be proud of every little signature I put in.
Did you catch the goggles? The pilot's goggles on the head of the car that he has like very subtle, but it's just a reference. It's just it's not the focus of the scene.
No, and you know, for me, one of the things. Okay, so it's just referencing back to Mel Gibson and his Mad Max. The one thing that I was actually looking for, and I was happy to find it, was his leg brace.
Yeah.
I'm going, I go, he has to have a leg brace. I mean, he just has to. And there were scenes in which the leg brace was there. I had to look for it. It was never anything that was zoomed in on. But that is such a part of the Mad Max character, especially, after Mad Max going into Road Warrior. And Colin Gibson, who's doing the production design, supervised the hand building of more than 150 cars, such as the Peacemaker, and there was no CG answer to it. Like, they used on some of the wide shots they put in some CG just to fill out the shot a little more. But when you're working on 150 cars, 150, and then you're racing them in the desert, I mean, for me, a tiring shoot, but at least they had this whole area in which Miller, using multiple cameras, can catch whatever shot he wanted, because it wasn't like filming in a street or in a mall where they had to say, okay guys, you got to wrap it up because we have commerce coming through. No, he was out in a big desert that he could play in the sandbox literally. And the production designers, to your point, again, in creating this world, they made things familiar but yet look so drastically different.
To me, it's a puzzle, and so many movies, particularly franchise right now, particularly like the big budget, you're talking about movies are spending over $1 million, Easter eggs have become a focus. Every movie comes out, and there's always an article within the next week being like, the 12 Easter eggs you might have missed. What I love about Mad Max is there is probably 100 Easter eggs.
Oh, so many.
But it's not the zoom in, take a second to understand it. It's if I want to go back, or if I could take stills, you can see them because they are there, and it's not for I want to give this to the audience.
Right.
It's a love letter to the world they created, and it's just part of the world.
Right, absolutely.
I mean, you have the guy hanging on the engine on the front of the car. You have that scene.
Right.
You have he's having trouble with the shotgun. You have the shotgun shells in Road Warrior. You have the goggles that we talked about earlier.
Even
the music box that he gave to the Beastly Kid.
Yeah, and even the swinging on the poles. That was in the original Mad Max, where people swung on poles, and I was like, oh, that's very interesting, because that was such a prominent thing in the trailer. And again, when I saw the trailer for this movie, if anything, I thought this is going to look gorgeous at the very least, with in the way the explosions were done, and even the car crashes. And it's funny, I'll bring it up. Again, I couldn't help at certain scenes. I was thinking of Furious 7. And one of the things that I talked about of Furious 7 is that in that particular movie, they seem to get a little bit over their heads. Like, they seem to make it a little bit ludicrous that you're not going to... It was straining credibility.
You can't crash a car through 3 different buildings?
Yeah, I mean...
that's news to me.
I know.
Yeah, it was just
I thought that was practical.
No, and you're just straining credibility a little bit. And again, I know that in Furious 7 that they built a lot of cars and, putting shells over engines and I get that. But in this movie, like, these cars I knew were real, and they were being put through these situations. Like, they were crashing cars. No different than what they did in the original Mad Max. I mean, so I think that this is a refreshing thing for audiences to see because it hasn't been done. It's not usually relied on. So, hopefully this means more practical effects. Hopefully now model makers, will be finding some work. But watching Mad Max Fury Road, you can't take away. It really looked great. We were talking with Phil a little bit, and, I wish he was... We've tried to get him on. I wish he was here as the counterbalance because I'm sure there are other people who I don't get it. What's the big deal about this movie? I think so many layers going on. The music is another thing about this movie because it was very industrial. It was very industrial rock, and again, it's sort of industrial has been around for a long time, but when you're going to a mass audience like this, it sounds different. It sounds big and ominous. It is not an orchestral soundtrack. Not that I have anything against orchestral soundtracks, but listening to the Mad Max Fury Road soundtrack, it is in your face, but it's different.
And it makes sense.
Yes.
When you're watching the movie, it makes sense. What I said about when they slow scenes down, this thing makes sense. You got a guy strapped to bungee cords in long johns playing a flamethrower guitar.
Right.
Okay, and he was so imagery based on Eddie from Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
If you look at the if you go back, look at all the Iron Maiden album covers, you see this guy who's got his eyes covered. He looks like he's a skeleton. He looks like he's dead, and he's in long johns with like the.
Right.
It was amazing.
Yeah. No.
It didn't make sense, but it was
no,
amazing.
it doesn't make sense. But what does in that world? And again, I think there was another thing when we were talking about narrative that I hadn't known, especially watching the movie, but it was shot in sequence.
Yeah.
So. Rarely today is a movie shot in sequence. So,
especially action movies.
Especially action movies.
Except for the ending, though.
Movies.
They did do reshoots because when they brought this to test audiences originally, nobody liked it.
I heard differently.
No, what we were talking about earlier in the week on the other show, they had to do research and that reshoots because the test audiences were a fan of the movie up until a point. Right. And then they hated the ending. They hated the last 20, 30 minutes of the movie.
Interesting.
And you can kind of see it, and what we're kind of discussing is the whole movie is one big cut, except when they finally get to their destination, the Greenland, and then it cuts to black and goes back to Furiosa and all that. But then after that, there's several times where it goes to black and then comes back, goes to black and comes back.
Right.
I don't think that was originally planned, but the way they did it was great. Like the way the final draft of this movie, you leave wanting more, but you don't leave gypped.
Yeah, it makes me wonder what that ending may have been because again, with George Miller and this character of Max, they don't end on a.
They probably killed Furiosa.
Yeah, they don't end on a good note.
Probably killed someone.
Yeah, I mean, and somebody dies that's close to Max. Like, they don't end up well for our hero. He usually ends up either being outcast again, and he's walking off into the sand and sunset, but not on a horse.
It's very much expected that he's going to be haunted by someone else.
Yeah,
because that seems to be the summation of his madness and his life.
And
is that on every part he always just takes away the one person he can't save. And really, in this, you don't get in Fury Road, you don't get that emotional impact because you didn't have the emotional tie to Nux between Mad Max. So you're not carrying away that he's going to feel guilty over him. We didn't add another person to Max's subconscious evil mind.
Outside of Furiosa, who, he ends up appreciating, and dare I say for Max, he liked her. He appreciated her courage, and he's like, what, I can jump behind this cause. I'll help them out. And even road maps. When you think about this movie, it's a movie that goes from point A to B back to A. There's never really a C because they get to where they're going, And then it's like, well, why don't we just turn around? And they go, really turn around after
But now
all
we
of this?
don't have the pregnant one.
Right.
Go back! They know we're undefended!
Yeah, go back. And it's just
I
like...
don't know why I was Richard Nixon for that, but
It's, you know,
happens.
and again, it's part of that simplicity, but done with layers that I think really makes a Mad Max movie a Mad Max movie. So, but again, I think it just introduced to today's audiences. You know, we have... We've been bombarded by a lot of CG, you know, whether it's the Avengers, which, listen, I get it. From going into that kind of a movie, you know, I get it. But this is outside of your superhero world, and it's reintroducing a character that we haven't seen in such a long time. There was like I said, the audience I saw this with, they loved it. They truly got into this movie. So. What else should we talk about? I mean, we talk about, absolutely. I mean, you know, this movie, you know, for all intents and purposes, it you know, what its budget was, what its production budget, and what its actual budget. You know, production budget of $150 million. Which it was all up on screen. If you're looking at a production budget, you know, and I think that Warner Brothers did an amazing job marketing this movie because you have to re-educate a lot of the audience. I mean, it's been 30 years.
Yeah.
That's a tough thing to ever do a continuation of.
and a lot of the old fans are wondering, are they going to ruin it?
Are they going to ruin it? And you already don't have Mel Gibson in it. So they did a great job in spending the money and making the trailers. They cut the trailers perfectly, I felt, in my mind. And so with that, you get a total budget, including the hard drives and advertising, of $210 million. That's a lot of cash for a Mad Max movie.
Yeah.
You know, just to give you a little bit of perspective on what that means, okay? The original Mad Max, because I was just so curious about this. We're looking at what it grossed, okay? Mad Max, the first one, came out in 1980, did $8.7 million all in. Road Warrior did $23 all in, but that was on 708 locations, okay? So 708 locations back in 1982 for a movie to do $23 million, like, you're not even at 1,000.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you had Beyond Thunderdome, which did $36 million all in, and that opened up in '85, and that was in 1,400 locations. Just for comparison, Mad Max Fury Road opened up on 3,722 locations, bringing in $59 million for its. Right now, it's about $59.63 million all in, but it did 45 opening weekend. So,
But then look at how much the first Mad Max cost. Wasn't it like $300,000 was its budget? Or
yeah, it was
300,
dirt
400.
cheap. And, you know, when you look at something like 210 all in, you know, I mean, the good thing is that Warner Brothers did put their money where their mouth is. They spent. They wanted to advertise. They put a lot out there. They were going up against Pitch Perfect, which they knew wasn't going to be their audience, but they couldn't be forgotten. They couldn't be, that they didn't want to be left in the
They
fray.
didn't make it rated PG-13 to cater to more people. They didn't do that.
They kept
I'm
Thank
so
goodness.
thankful.
Absolutely.
If they had made this PG-13, it would not be the
wouldn't.
movie. It is.
I agree.
You can't make this movie PG-13. It defies its own theme of like survival at any cost. Yeah, if you're having a PG-13, you're eliminating a lot
Right.
of that cost.
Yeah, and then when you're looking at worldwide box office right now, it's about 130 plus million. That's pretty good. I mean, they're on their way. I think the movie has garnered enough goodwill, you know, to the point where, you know, there may be more fills out there. Because how many times have we been to a movie? And I'm saying this because I know I'm not special and unique in this way. We've heard so many good things about a movie that when you finally get around to seeing it, you know, what the hell is everybody talking about?
This movie is
right?
not everyone's cup of tea. It's
No.
definitely not. But if you're in it for, let's say you can't go to Disneyland one year and you just want to go for, you just
Right.
want to have a ride.
Yeah.
You just want to ride, sit back,
Sure.
and just immerse yourself.
Yeah.
That's what this movie. It's a summer blockbuster. It's a great movie where you just, the moment you step in, you're all in, and then the moment you step out, you feel exhausted, but you're like, that was crazy.
It's exhaustingly awesome.
Yeah.
Again, that's another quote from my friend Peter Block. But 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. the only thing that rivals it so far this year is Ex Machina, as far as Rotten Tomato on the tomato meter.
I still need to watch that.
Yeah, and what's great about this, and what's great about the movie-going experience is that you can see a Mad Max, which is all beautiful, glorious action, and then you can slow things down, go see an Ex Machina. It's still going to look beautiful in the way that it's shot, and that's what I love about going to the movies.
Well, the greatest thought, though, that I'm going to throw in there is with movies like Ex Machina and Mad Max, sometimes the ratings on Rotten Tomatoes are so high, it's because it's a very kind of niche genre for those who are going and pursuing this film. With most likely, if you're going to see Mad Max and review it, it's up your alley. Versus like when you put a more broad film out there, then you're going to get a range of scores, which is going to make it drop a little bit.
I disagree with that because you're talking. Rotten Tomatoes does a thing of all critics. They're not just going. Like I disagree because there are many drama movies that do really well. Like they're not. Look, a movie draws whether it's a science fiction movie, whether it's a I've seen horror movies that have gotten. It follows huge on Rotten Tomatoes. That didn't mean that
It wasn't a very good movie.
Yeah, but it didn't mean that just Fangoria people were writing reviews on it. It means that it was actually a good movie.
True, but
also or it could be a good
I'm
movie.
not saying it's like dropping at 30%. I'm talking about the fact that when a movie meets your expectations or is very much in line with the expectations that they've put out there, it's going to score higher. Versus if you throw out, I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head, which is not
I think
coming
with
to
Mad
me.
Max, I don't think there was any expectation being that it's 30 years. I think critics went into this hoping to maybe like it because the trailers were good. And the mere fact that it got a 98%, that shocked me.
I think
that it got so universally liked by so many people.
You do this movie 12 years ago, it would not do well.
I can't say that either.
If you take this movie as it is with the same cast whoever did it 12 years ago, will not do as well. Even if you have the stars of 12 years ago, the past 6 years of our pop culture and everything has been very geared towards this post-apocalyptic world where a lot of teenagers are growing up with these shows, which like the 100, you have like levels of it for age ranges. You have the 100 for CW, you have Walking Dead for people a little older. A lot of our media for the past 6 years has been building up to people really like the apocalypse. People like the concept.
But I'm gonna throw this in there. If this movie was called anything other than Mad Max, it wouldn't have done as well. I think that Mad Max through pop culture has built enough awareness where you want to call it a cult fan base, fine. But I think it's a little bit above. I mean, Mad Max has been around for a while, and this is reintroducing it. If you were to have called this, Joe, I don't know, Joe, not even used a name. If you just called this movie Fury Road, I just don't. Like there would be nothing. People would have said this is another post-apocalyptic movie that happens to look good, but there's no story to it. There's no this.
I don't disagree with that. But 12 years ago,
Max,
if they decided to reinvent Mad Max without all of the lead up with this apocalypse talk and all of these fans of apocalypse stories, it would not have done as well.
Yeah,
because it would have gotten that. It would have gotten that cult following for Mad Max. And everyone else would have been like, what the hell is this?
I disagree because Mad Max is doing post-apocalyptic before it even became, cool to say out loud. I just think that knowing and showing the trailers, bringing George Miller back, I think that had a little bit of cachet. But the way in which the marketing came out and re-educated audiences and they made it look big. I don't think people gave a shit that it took place in a post-apocalyptic world. I think they were going in because they felt that they were going to be something, and this is how the advertising was shown, and the reviews came out that they were going to be seeing something different. They marketed the practical effects of this movie. I just think that it came out at a great time because they were able to get all these locations, and I think it brought in an adult audience, rated R, and $45 million. Again, it over-indexed to what a lot of prognosticators were saying this movie was going to bring in.
I'll throw out there that to me, you mentioned the word different, and that does apply to timing, which makes it, I'm kind of in between you two, where timing is part of what made this movie successful and it's making people like it, because we've seen so many franchise films that are relying so heavily on huge plots and huge cities crumbling down, and we've seen a lot of the same thing over and over. And I think as it comes to film, Mad Max, this whole desert apocalyptic practical effects movie did have a spark of telling people it was going to be different from all the other films they've been seeing recently.
Personally, I think post-apocalyptic is getting tired. I mean, look at grosses on the Divergent series. Who knows what Maze Runner is going to do? I think as far as a storytelling thing, it's getting cliche. Not every movie has to be post-apocalyptic, but Mad Max was already set in that world in 1980. I mean, it more or less, it's in a sense, I don't want to say it invented it, because when you look at movies like Planet of the Apes, it's always been a staple in very good science fiction. Mm-hmm. You could say, in a sense, that Mad Max can fall under the science fiction genre, as well as action. But I just think that had it not been called, if it had just been called Fury Road and this guy was named, Demetri, I don't think people would have cared as much.
No, they wouldn't have.
And I don't think, I think the curiosity was what brought people in. The reviews brought people in, the marketing. When you get a 98%, like if the movie sucked, it probably would have done maybe 35. Like if this movie was bad, because then it would have gotten people as, I don't want to see this, I could care less.
Question, if they had called Waterworld Mad Wax Waterworld.
They thought about it. It's really funny because I was working at Universal. I worked with that movie, and many people were saying, oh, it just looks like Mad Max in the water. And my response was, because at the time we sort of kind of knew the movie that we had and what we were going up against. No, I mean, it's true, because, I'm trying to market this movie. I'm trying to get theaters to put posters and standees and trailers up on screen, and people were saying, oh, this looks like Mad Max in the water. I'm like going, yeah, so what's so bad about making that comparison? Like, but there comes a stigma because of all the other negativity. That didn't happen with this Mad Max Fury Road. So, I just think that this movie came out at the right time. I think it was expertly marketed to get the audience that it did. I think it's building up enough goodwill that perhaps, now it's going into a tough weekend. We're going into, Memorial Day weekend, but it's going to have those, it's going to have 3 days, and people are going to, I think we're going to get more people go, like Phil, and go, what did I didn't like this movie. Because now you're just going to get more and more people, because at a 98%, that's how an Ex Machina ends up doing so well. It's because it builds up goodwill and people are talking about it, just like people have been talking about Mad Max this entire week.
I think the reason Pitch Perfect's going to do so well is because people love it. Because apparently it's a really good movie, and that's what I've heard, and I'm excited because I like it when good movies come out. The importance of this, as much as I don't like Rotten Tomatoes because it's a lot of crap, to be perfectly honest, that's how people decide to go to movies now. I think Mad Max has nothing to worry about budget-wise, because in the next few weeks, it's going to stay up there. It's going to stay. Yeah. People are going to keep going, because with the current state of the economy and how people are spending money, they want to know something's good before they go see it. And this is a movie that consistently everyone is saying it's good, so people don't feel like they're gambling, going out there and spending $15, $20 on a movie ticket.
And that's why that moviegoer should get Movie Pass. to go to the movies, but I agree. But I think the legs on this movie, I think it's going to weather this storm pretty well, and I think globally it's going to do really well. I personally will get this on Blu-ray, DVD. I'll get it in 3D and whatever. And I can't wait. I'm hoping that there is good bonus material where I can learn even more about it, either whether it's a commentary behind the
scenes, people. Yeah. Watch it. It is. Yeah. Awesome. You see them, it's not even filtered, it's not edited to look like a movie or anything. Mm-hmm. It's literally just the people on the bikes and the cars on the pikes and stuff doing all that kind of stuff. You get to see how they did all these stunts.
Yeah.
It's
great stuff.
Phenomenal.
And then when John Seale turned 70, that's the other thing too. John Seale, the DP, turned 70 while making this movie. Okay, George Miller, is anybody on IMDb? I mean, he's got to be in... He's got to be broaching he has to be broaching 70 at this point.
Yeah, he's 70 right now. March 3rd, so yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, you were talking about people who have been working in this industry. Again, we always say this, when it's a good movie, it's a great collaborative, effort. And I think for lack of, all pun intended, all cylinders were firing on this movie, and I think they delivered a good summer action movie, which you can talk about in so many different ways.
It's interesting how Hollywood works, though, because you look at the producers from 30, 40 years ago, and they're all kind of they're considered old Hollywood now. But you look at the people with like the talents for making the things. You look at the directors, the DPs, like the talent, and they're just as strong, if not stronger than before, because they're not in the business side of it, and that's what I enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing too with the Mad Max is it was sort of bold for Warner Brothers and in allowing George Miller to do this and get his vision across. Now, again, I'll be curious to know what that original ending may have been. It could have been a little bit darker, so maybe there was a little bit of Hollywood politics that played into them doing the reshoots. I don't know. But it's bold because this movie, it's not everybody's cup of tea. For a rated R action movie, having some guy with a guitar that shoots out flames and bungee jumping and it's,
but
industrial music, loud.
if you are into action and you are into the speed and you want to see some great practical effects, like, recommend it to people so they will go see it and keep this movie making money.
Yeah, and actually, too, we can wrap up. I think did we miss anything? Was there anything that anybody wanted to throw into the table?
I'm sure there's more, but I think I'm good.
Yeah, I just think that, yes, you're going to go see a movie in which you could take any frame from this movie, blow it up, frame it, and you can hang it on the wall. I think it really is the most beautiful action movie since Skyfall. It looks fantastic. It is exhausting, but in an exhilarating kind of way. You get out of this movie and you feel, wow, I just saw something different. It's that dose of medicine after watching a bunch of superhero movies, a bunch of post-apocalyptic young adult novel movies. This is a good counterbalance.
What would your rating be for this movie? 1 to 10.
1 to 10? Oh, I usually go by a 4-star, and I'd give it a 4 for me. I really it's one of my favorites. It's right next to Ex Machina as my favorite movie of the year. This one is probably my second, along with Kingsman right now, and then I got to throw Cinderella. Now, again, I have to throw this out here. When we talk Cinderella, I said at the time, Academy, you cannot forget about this movie and its cinematography because it looked beautiful. And I said at the time, we have plenty of time to go before the end of the year. There could be another movie. This is the movie that I think can top Cinderella. But you got to give these two slots. You got to give Cinderella and Mad Max cinematography. Academy, do not forget about Mad Max. Just because it was released in the summer does not mean cinematography-wise it is not a beautiful movie.
They need for stunts. They need an Oscar for stunts, and I know they turned it down a while ago, but they need it. If we're gonna start getting more into practical effects, we need that. Because the fact that this movie can only really be nominated for cinematography and directing, that's a shame.
But they should, because prove to me, Academy, that you're not a bunch of old fogies. Just prove to me that that's not going to happen, and have this movie get some semblance of credit when it comes to nomination time.
Sarah, 1 out of 10?
1 out of 10.
1 to 10, sorry.
Sorry, I wouldn't give it a 1 out of 10. I think that it's hard to specify. I think that I'd probably give it an 8. I really, really, really like this movie. It's beautiful. It's fun. It is a masterpiece for the big screen. I think that you can get really detail-oriented with it, and I think it's beautiful. It was really fun to see. Definitely not wasted money.
I think that her opinion changed a tad from when we first started.
No, I think I still like it. It's not. I don't.
But an 8's a high score out of 10.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say 8.59. I think for me, on my personal scale, with all the movies I've seen before and what I think of this movie, it's one of those things that you need to see in theaters. It's one of those things that you got to go see in theaters. And Gravity was a movie you need to see in theaters, but I have no intention of ever watching Gravity again. But this
I've seen it many times.
This movie, I already want to watch it again. I already want to watch it again. I want to go to 4DX. I want to sit in the chairs and have it beat the crap out of me and just enjoy it.
Yeah.
That's the kind of movie it is.
Well, it's not meant for this, folks. Fury Road, even Ex Machina, not meant to be watched on your iPad. There's so much to take in on Fury Road. It's a beautiful film. It is a great audience experience kind of movie. It's not singular. It's not watching it at home on your couch by yourself. yourself or on your dumb phone or iPad, you know, you want to be with a good audience for this movie and to just revel and be sucked in. So, all right, so as we're wrapping up, let's go. Steven, I know you said it at the top of the show, but please remind our audience, where can people find you and ping you?
You guys can find me on Twitter at Stephen Lemieux. We're doing AfterBuzz shows. I think Graceland's the only one that's coming back that I'm doing right now. And favorite line of the movie, guys, you gotta go, "Oh, what a lovely day!"
That was actually
It is the
pretty good.
tagline, and it is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I've
Sarah,
said that word way too much.
As being our female awesome perspective on this, let's do. You know, it was great. Where can people find you on your birthday?
On my birthday,
Happy
I'm
birthday,
here.
birthday,
I'm
Sarah.
here. I'm going to be thanks, guys. I'm going to be talking about Pitch Perfect in a literally 1 minute. And yeah, you can find me on Box Office Breakdown. We talk about some numbers, Anatomy of a Movie always, and also AfterBuzz TV stuff like Game of Thrones, Penny Dreadful. Love the dark and the action packed, I guess.
Talk Game of Thrones. Again, Demetri Panos. You can find me here at Anatomy of a Movie. Great privilege to be with you folks. I'm also on Twitter at DMovies1701. I was told to say 1701 as opposed to 1701. So at DMovies1701. Please, I welcome your comments. Go into the Popcorn Talk Network. You can find us YouTube, iTunes. Comment. Let us know what you thought of the movie.
You can throw Demetri a happy birthday.
Yeah, throw me under a bus, you know, which ends up happening. Wanted to say thank you very much for listening. Please continue to tune into the Popcorn Talk Network 24/7. It's all movies. Tune into Anatomy of a Movie. We got the rest of the summer to talk about. So can't wait. And thank you very much for watching and listening, folks.
See you next time.
Wonderful.
Producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.
We didn't go off topic.